In the previous video, we looked at the ESXi firewall in great depth. In this video, we will look at the vSphere 6.x single sign-on architecture, which is a great advancement over all prior versions of vSphere. We will look at key documents, the hardening guide and the security guide. We will look at the security support that's provided in vSphere Configuration Manager, so that the recommendations of the hardening guide for the risk profiles 1, 2, and 3, which basically means risk profile 1 is top secret government level and risk profile 3 is ordinary regular production, and for compliance one would need at least a risk profile 2. All the parameters and the values that need to be set are set very easily because of the support provided for the hardening guide recommendations in the vSphere Configuration Manager. We will do a single sign-on architectural review. We'll see how it is structured with platform services controllers and management nodes that can be implemented separately. We will also look at the sign-on process and the passing of tokens back and forth. And then, of course, we will have multiple labs where we will look at many different platform services controllers. In fact, I have a setup where there is one vCenter set up to and it's pointing to platform services controller. There are two platform services controllers for that domain. So I show you how to point your vCenter to one or the other, and then how to actually replicate between those multiple platform services controllers. So now let's take a look at one of the key documents that are available for vSphere 6 hardening and for vSphere 6 security. Obviously, the very first one that we need to look at is the vSphere 6 hardening guide. There is one available for other versions of vSphere as well. But basically what the hardening guide is an Excel spreadsheet that is available. You can Google for this, and it has a list of guidelines. So you can see the list of guidelines here. The risk profiles are 1, 2, and 3. And what this means is this. Risk profile 1 is meant to be implemented in the most secure environments such as top secret or government installations. Risk profile 2 is in a sensitive environment where you need to protect sensitive data that has to be kept compliant according to compliance guidelines. And risk profile 3 is intended to be implemented in basically all production environments. And you can see these are prescriptive. And you can go through these guidelines. Let's scroll to the right. So obviously the first one is obvious one. For all risk profiles, keep the ESXi system properly patched. That is kind of an obvious thing. The discussion, the configuration parameters, well, they don't really matter because it depends on what you're actually looking to do. And you can see as you scroll across, you can actually use the vSphere API, or you can use the ESXi shell to check the ESXi software web-get as an example, and then you can remediate it with the software profile update. There are vCLI commands and the remediation commands and the power CLI commands, and using host profiles, can you do it or not, and some reference information that's available here as well. So the hardening guide is a long list of guidelines that are applicable to different profiles, and as we scroll down all the way, we see that there are about 76 of these. Now if you have more than a few ESXi hosts, this becomes a very difficult thing to actually manage. So how do you actually go about doing it? Now this is where there is another connection between the various VMware tools that actually comes into play. In the VMware vCenter Configuration Manager, which is called VCM, the policies which have been defined in the hardening guide are actually automated. So this toolkit consists of automated compliance tools to basically assess the environment and to match it up against the hardening guide. So, and it covers all the hardening guide recommendations. Now let's take a look at the next really important document that's available, which is vSphere Security for ESXi 6. This is a document of 266 pages, but we are going to scroll through it briefly to look at the contents first. So it tells you how to secure the ESXi hypervisor, the vCenter, virtual machines, and so on, right? And then it talks about, in a separate chapter, about the vSphere authentication of vSphere single sign-on. You can see there's a separate chapter on vSphere security certificates, one on vSphere permissions and user management tasks, and this is obviously something that you probably understand already. Separate chapters on securing ESXi hosts, securing vCenter server systems, securing virtual machines, vSphere networking, best practices, which are basically synchronizing clocks and storage, and the various timeouts, and of course the privileges. You must all be familiar with this. So a really extensive guide to the entire spectrum of vSphere security management. From this, let's move to chapter 2, because we are going to look at understanding how vSphere authentication works in vSphere 6 with the vCenter single sign-on. So there's a single sign-on capability function that's available. Basically, it's an authentication broker and a security token exchange infrastructure. Uses user receives a SAML token after authentication, and then the SAML token, which is the security assertion markup language token, can be used to authenticate to other vCenter services, like it says here. And then, of course, the usual permissions model of that's there actually kicks in. So vCenter single sign-on in version in vSphere 6 is part of the platform services controller, which contains the shared services that support vCenter server and other components as well. And these services are basically the single sign-on service, the certificate authority, the VMCA, the license service, and the lookup service. And we will go into a little bit more detail to see what it looks like. Okay, so this is your vCenter single sign-on package. Basically, your certificate authority and the VMware directory service, which is called VMDIR. So the first step is that user logs in into the vSphere web client, the username and password, or to access another vCenter service. You can use Windows session authentication as well. The vSphere client passes the login information to the single sign-on service, so it comes here as step 2. Single sign-on checks whether the user is in the configured identity source. So in this case, for example, if it's assume there's no other identity source except the vCenter single sign-on itself. So it'll check its a default domain or whatever domain has been specified. When we do the lab, you'll see that I've specified 2 platform services controllers and 1 vCenter, and those platform services controller actually have a domain of pactpub.local. And once that authentication is done to that identity source, vCenter single sign-on returns a token, and then this token is passed back to the vCenter server, and then vCenter server checks back with the single sign-on server to check the token is valid and not expired. And then when single sign-on server then returns the token back, then it is basically leveraging the vCenter server authorization framework, and the user can now authenticate, view and modify any objects. The vCenter server authorization framework is called vCenter VCAFD, D for the daemon that actually runs there, and we will have an opportunity to start and stop that daemon as well. So the components of vCenter single sign-on are the security token service, which issues the SAML tokens. There's an administration server, which allows users with administrative privileges to log on to vCenter single sign-on. This is again different from the vCenter administration. This is for single sign-on administration. There's a VMware directory service, a really cool thing which is available, which is it is associated is a service that is available in the platform services controller, and this service is multi-tenanted and multi-mastered directory service, and it basically replicates. So if the environment has more than one instance of a platform services controller, then an update is propagated to all other instances of VMDIR that are in that domain. So very useful. And of course, there's the identity management services that handles the various identity sources and so on, in case there are other external identity sources that can be associated with the single sign-on service. Now, of course, there are different aspects around whether you are upgrading from version ESXi 5.1 or 5.5 to 6.0. Again, I would recommend looking at the guide here to understand exactly what that entails. But to just round out the entire SSO architecture, really what it is that you can either have the platform services controller embedded in the vCenter installation, or you can have separate instances of platform services controller even across multiple sites in vSphere 6.0 update 1 that the vCenter can then actually connect to. And in the lab, we will actually explore some of those options. So key features are there is a VMware certificate authority that is automatically installed, and all the traffic that flows between the various vSphere components is SSL encrypted using machine certificates, all handled automatically by the VMware certificate authority, and the entire service provided by the single sign-on services that includes the VMware directory service. So we are now back in the vSphere web client, and as you can see, I have linked mode vCenter servers here. So we have 220, which is our PactPub headquarters, and 221, which is one of our branches. Let's look at 220 only. I've clicked on 220 related objects, virtual machines, and you can see that there's a PSC 201-1 and a -2 that are available here. Although this virtual machine is running only at this point in time. The PSC stands for Platform Services Controller. And what I've done is I've installed two platform services controllers, both in the same domain, which is pactpub.local. I also have an NSX vCenter, which is actually pointing to these platform services controllers, although it is not powered up at this point in time. So next thing we're going to do is to actually log in into the platform services controller -201-1 and explore with the CLI some of the VMware directory services capabilities that exist. So I'm now logged in as root into the VMware vCenter appliance server 6. It's of type platform services controller, and it's the PSC 01 that's running at .81. So first thing I need to do here is to launch the shell. For that I need to key in shell.set -- enabled true, and then I need to launch the shell, and here we are. Okay, let's take a look at some of the capabilities that the VMware directory services provide. So I'll do a cd to /users/lib, and we'll do a list, and you will see that there are some really interesting directories in here. There's something called VMware SSO. Of course, the VMware tools directory is there as well. The VMware VMA-FD is the VMware authentication framework daemon, and this directory contains a lot of interesting tools. This is for the certificate authority itself, and this is for the VMware directory services, and that's where we are going to go next. So we'll cd to VMware-vmdir, and then I do an ls, and you can see there are many other library directories in here as well. So I will do a cd to the binaries, and then do an ls, and you can see that there are other commands that are available here, like the vdc admin tool and so on. We're going to use the vdc rep admin. This is for the domain control replication administration, basically. So let's see what happens when we say /vdc rep admin help, and we get the help. This one looks interesting. VDC rep admin.f show partners. Presumably it will show us the partners in the whole replication domain, other platform services controller. Okay, so we can show partners, we can show servers, and there are various agreements and so on. So let's try this. Let's key in /vdc rep admin, vdc rep admin -f show servers first for the host, local host, which is this platform services controller. And what I want to do is to -user is add administrator admin -password is w is and the result we get back is that there are two servers that are working together in this, which are this server itself, which is 0.81, and then there is this other server 0.82, and the canonical name of the site is pactpub-hq, and then the domain is pactpub.local and pactpub.local. So both of these platform service controllers are serving pactpub.local, and they are both at this same site. Now we can show the partners here as well. Now remember, the other platform services controller at this point is not powered on. So instead of show servers, we'll show partners. And it knows about the other partner, even though it's not powered on. And this is this point in time. At some point in time, they did actually communicate. So really, what this is meant to show you is the fact that there are many interesting CLIs in here, and we can go back a few cd dot dot. We do an ls cd dot dot one more time, user lib, we cd to VMware dash VM AF daemon slash bin, and we ls, and you can see that there are three other actually CLIs: the dir CLI, the vex CLI, and the VMAFD CLI. We'll go into these in more detail in a later video in this section, but let me give you a flavor for what one can actually find out. So after clearing the screen and going to this directory, let's do /VMA authentication framework daemon dash CLI get site name dash dash server dash name, and we see that the site that this platform services controller has been defined for is pactpub.hq, which we saw in a different way earlier as well. And you can get the domain name here as well. And the reason I'm showing this to you is because with the new update 1 of vSphere 6, you now have the ability to actually change the platform services controller to which a vCenter is pointing to a different site as well, as long as it's in the same domain. So some of these commands are needed to make sure that we're in the right place. So of course the domain, as we know, is pactpub.local. I'm now going to go ahead and start up the second platform services controller and also the vCenter server, and then we'll get back into the lab. So we are back now with three new screens here. One is the 0.224 that you see here. That's the vCenter that started up. In the background, you see .82 and .81, which are the two platform services controllers that are serving the domain pactpub.local for site pactpub-hq. We need to look at some of the CLI in the vCenter server. So I've cleared the screen, and we're looking at our vCenter server that is being served by two platform services controllers in the domain pactpub.local. Let's look at a utility actually, which is called cmSSO, cmSSO dash util. I'll key this in with the dash h to tell us what it does. So it is a tool for orchestrating changes to IDs, machine certificates, unregistering a node from the various components of a SSO, reconfiguring vCenter server with an embedded PSC, and repointing a vCenter server to an external PSC. So obviously, if you have a vCenter server running with an embedded PSC, and then you install a second PSC and in the same domain, you have the ability to actually connect your vCenter server to that external PSC. We have the reconfigure, the repoint to, we're going to try this option here. we will repoint a vCenter with an external platform services controller to the provided external platform services controller. So we already are running this with platform services controller.81, and we will repoint it now to platform services controller .82, and SCM SSO dash util repoint dash repoint dash platform services controller, and then I need I'll give it the IP 192.168.0.82. So you would do this in the case that you are going to, for some reason, doing maintenance or something else like that on some machine that's running the initial platform services controller. Although in a management cluster, you would be easily able to obviously vMotion it across, and there are various ways to keep it up and running. But what I used it for earlier was to actually show in the backup scenario how I could point the vCenter server to a new platform services controller in the same domain, and then essentially back up, wipe out, re-restore the initial platform services controller. So, in a scenario like that, it's a little contrived, but it would be a possibility. So we see that the platform services controller 82 is already the current active platform services controller of this vCenter server. So we will move it to 81. It's validating the configuration. It's executing the steps, and we will wait until it finishes. And this took about 5 minutes, but as you can see, it validated the configuration. It completed the validation successfully. It's executed the repointing steps, stopped services, or started all the services, and then the vCenter server is now been repointed to the external platform services controller 168.0.81 that I had previously restored from backup. What I'd done was I had wiped it out after doing the backup and restored. And in the meantime, I had been running against .81, and now I moved it back to, I was running against .82, and now I moved it back to .81. Now I'm running the version of vSphere 6.0. In update 1 of vSphere 6, there is another option that's available in the CM SSO-util tool, which is called Move Services. So right now, in this example that I showed you, I did the repoint to a different platform service controller, but that platform service controller, while being in the same domain, pactpub.local, was also at the same site, which was pactpub-hq. In update 1 of vSphere 6, there's a new version of this utility that actually then, once the repoint is done, you can actually move your services and the repoint actually over to another platform services controller serving the same domain but at a different site. So that command would be cmsso-util, and then the move-services option, which then prompts you as to where you want to go. So it's really pretty cool, because with update 1 of vSphere 6, and that's cmsso-util tool, you're able to not only point to platform service controllers at the same site in the same domain, but in the same domain at different sites as well. Obviously, very useful from a recoverability viewpoint, redundancy viewpoint, and so on. Having looked at the vSphere 6.0 single sign-on architecture and the command line tools available, in the next video we will look at the VMware Certificate Manager tool that simplifies the process of managing certificates in the vSphere 6.x environment.